Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Witherell, Director of the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. On behalf of Berkeley Lab and our event partners at CQ Roll Call and the University of California Office of National Laboratories, thank you for participating in today's briefing, Building Climate and Energy Solutions One Atom at a Time. Over the next hour, leaders from Congress, the Department of Energy, Berkeley Lab, academia, and other nonprofits will discuss the critical role that basic science and the DOE Office of Science in particular holds in meeting ambitious climate and clean energy targets. Basic science serves as the foundation for transformative technologies that will help address the climate and energy challenges that we're already experiencing in our everyday lives. We need not look far to see the devastating impacts of extreme weather events or the toll that disappearing water resources have on communities or the cost of rising energy demand. Addressing these challenges will require sustained investment in the full ecosystem, from fundamental science to the development of applied technologies to deployment at scale. Berkeley Lab, one of 10 DOE Office of Science National Labs, serves as an example of the scope of research that is both possible and necessary. Our scientists conduct unclassified research across a wide range of disciplines, advancing fundamental knowledge and developing science solutions. Such efforts can be seen in Office of Science-funded facilities and projects across the nation. From understanding the impacts of climate change on communities and critical environments to engineering solutions for carbon capture and sequestration, the Office of Science, through a deep bench of world-leading scientists, multidisciplinary teams, and one-of-a-kind facilities, is poised to accelerate the delivery of workable solutions. Since its founding in 1931, Berkeley Lab has been managed by the University of California. I'm pleased to introduce now the University of California President, Dr. Michael Drake, to share a few words on the importance of basic research and the university's strong commitment to science. President Drake.
Good morning. On behalf of the University of California, I am pleased to welcome you to today's discussion on the climate and energy solutions of the future. UC, the U.S. Department of Energy, and the National Laboratories have a long and rich history of collaboration. For more than 3/4 of a century, our partnership has brought cutting-edge scientific and technological expertise to bear on the most urgent challenges of our time. Our research has resulted in innovations that enhance our national security and improve the public health, the environment, and our quality of life. This work has always been rooted in basic science, the foundation on which the ideas and technologies of the future are built. Today, you will hear from a distinguished group of policymakers and scientific leaders about how basic science is driving energy and climate breakthroughs. It has never been more important to invest in our country's most creative and innovative minds, many of whom have a home at UC and our national labs. Our scientists, engineers, technologists, and administrators are the key to building a more sustainable and equitable future for us all. Working together, I know we can stay on the forefront of scientific innovation that makes the world a better place. Thank you for your leadership, your vision, and your attention to these issues. The future of science is being built here, and I know the best is yet to come. Thank you all, and as we say here at UC, Fiat Lux, let there be light.
Thank you, President Drake, for those inspiring words. We're now joined by Ranking Member of the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee, Frank Lucas. So I'd like to start by just hearing your perspective on the role of basic science in addressing national challenges.
First off, Doctor, thank you for being able to join you today in this program. I consider it a real privilege and an honor. I also have a great privilege of being the ranking member on the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee. While many people think of the legislative process here in the nation's capital as being a little complicated, a little clumsy, perhaps even some might question the level of productivity, I would stress to you that of my committee assignments, Science, Space, and Technology it's a fun committee. It's a committee where we have a long, strong history of working together in support of basic research. Without fail, the basic research has generated the breakthrough technologies that have revolutionized life in America. I know that as a farmer, because I'm one of those folks who is a consumer of substantial amounts of energy. I'm also one of those people who when I'm not in the nation's capital, work to make sure that we use all those technological advances to raise the food and fiber we need. The committee's jurisdiction, whether it's the National Science Foundation or the national labs, there are amazing things going on. And I spend a lot of time with my constituents trying to explain that. I know the focus of our event today is about climate change solutions and energy production. And that's critical to everyone in this great nation. And in the Science Committee, we have worked to try and drive resources, try to provide substantial, consistent, steady additions to resources to create those technological breakthroughs that will take us to the next generation. As I remind my neighbors back home, and I live in an oil and gas country, perhaps ultimately fusion power is the answer to the world's problems. We have to spend the money on the basic research to create those breakthroughs that the industry will turn into practical delivery of resources. And until then, we have to work to make sure that we have sufficient resources to get to that point. Whether it's things like carbon capture emissions from coal or natural gas, batteries that store energy from intermittent sources. We have lots of electric windmills in Oklahoma. Solar panels are becoming more and more of a thing, or utilizing advanced nuclear reactors to provide cleaner, more affordable power until that point. It's the kind of work that private industry generally cannot afford to produce because they have to respond to the stockholders, they have to respond to the board of directors, they have to have return in a fashion and in a time frame that will continue to enable them to acquire the resources that are necessary. But the federal government, as has been demonstrated at this lab and labs and scientific investment all across the country since the 1930s, the federal government is the entity that is key to funding that basic research that will make the groundbreaking discoveries. Based on what we've seen in my lifetime, and for that matter, the lifetime of my parents, I have great expectations if we will provide the resources to the scientific community to enable them to continue the wondrous things that they've done. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't note that I'm extremely fond of my full committee chairman, Lady Bernice Johnson from Texas. We have a relationship on the committee that is reminiscent of the traditional, I won't say the old days, but the traditional committee days where both sides work together for the common good moving forward. We might have disagreements, but ultimately we want to do the right thing for the American people, and that is making sure that the necessary investments are made in basic research. So I'm a lucky fella to get to be ranking member on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee.
Thank you. And let me say, representing the Office of Science, that we are very lucky to have both you and Chairwoman Eddie Bernice Johnson working together in this way. We've received the benefits of that bipartisan work in the nation's interest. Speaking of that, please share some of your joint policy goals impacting the DOE Office of Science that are getting that sort of bipartisan support in your committee.
I'm very proud of a piece of legislation that was a part of the last large funding package at the end of 2020, the Energy Act of 2020, the first comprehensive update of our nation's energy policy in more than a decade. And that act focuses, of course, on advancing fundamental research and development activities in the support of things like a grid modernization, a critical mineral security, a high risk, a high reward, next generation energy technologies. It's signed into law. Now, in all the mayhem and the noise of recent times in Congress, occasionally the good things are overlooked, but that we passed in a bipartisan way. It became a part of the final funding package. It wasn't a freestanding bill, but the act was signed into law. So we're now working under that. Looking at 2021, I'm very proud of our Department of Energy Science for the Future Act, which basically doubles down on funding and provides a strategy for DOE's long-term basic research and development work. We have on the committee a jurisdiction over the civilian side of DOE's energy programs. The proposal invests $50 billion over 5 years in the Department of Energy Office of Science. It prioritizes basic research and Office of Science missions, including the national labs, provides a roadmap for DOE's research and development work, supports research on materials and chemical science, bioscience, climate science, fusion energy, scientific computing, high energy, and nuclear physics. This is a piece of legislation, much like the Energy Act of 2020, that was thoroughly vetted in regular order, lots of hearings, lots of discussions, bills introduced in a bipartisan way, amendments offered and debated, sorted out. It's the way you're supposed to legislate. Not only does this enable us to have a chance to make this become law, because it's necessary, but it may be a little bit of an example to all of my colleagues on the various committees. Do it the old-fashioned way, do it the thorough way, and you'll have a product you can actually be proud of, and the American people will benefit from.
Thank you. And let me say another benefit of that work you've done together. We're in the situation here of recruiting some of the best young scientists and engineers to work on national problems, and when, frankly, they have other opportunities in their career. And it really means a lot to them to have this sort of support from the House Science Committee and other parts of Congress, that it really understand how important it is. And it makes it my job easier in convincing these young people to work on these problems.
Oh, Doctor, we've had lots of hearings about the effect of the COVID year and a half on the research community, not just the undergraduates, but the postdoc students, their research projects. We have to try to overcome that, because we literally have a generation of, as you and I would both agree, the most amazingly bright minds, the most talented people who have lost basically a year and a half. We've got to make sure they don't lose their opportunity to continue the proper course. So EBJ and I, as I affectionately call my chairwoman, we're on the same page. We're moving together forward. I'm just very fortunate. And I would also note to some of my colleagues who are concerned about how we spend our money and what these technologies develop. If we really want to help the world address global industrial activity, I'm a farmer by trade at home. The weather patterns are changing. It is just what's happening. The technologies that we will incentivize the research dollars that will ultimately evolve into practical things, we'll be able to produce and export those technologies. We will enable the rest of the world to clean up the planet, so to speak. I'm just proud of that.
Ranking Member Lucas, thanks so much for joining us today. Those are inspiring words for all of us who work at the Office of Science. And now, speaking of the Office of Science, we're turning to one of the people who take a critical role in leading this. And so please join me in welcoming Dr. Harriet Kung to the virtual stage for keynote remarks. Dr. Kung is the Deputy Director for Science Programs in the Office of Science of the U.S. Department of Energy, where she serves as the senior career official providing scientific management direction and oversight for the SC research programs.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's a great honor and pleasure to join you today to discuss the critical role that basic research plays in building the foundation for developing solutions to climate and clean energy challenges. The Department of Energy Office of Science and the Department of Energy National Laboratories connect America's scientific ecosystems through long-term investment in fundamental research, scientific workforce, world-class scientific user facilities, and public-private partnerships that foster innovations. Over the decades, the investment made by the Office of Science have led to scientific discoveries that were the basis of over 100 Nobel Prizes, have also enabled countless new technologies, businesses large and small, and entirely new industries. A strong foundation of fundamental science provides a platform for a vibrant innovation ecosystem. The Office of Science is committed to investing and sustaining the innovation life cycle, bringing the science push and the market pull together. Through our support of over 25,000 researchers annually at universities and national laboratories across the nation, we sustain an incredible brain trust to advance our scientific knowledge. Our funding supports the high-risk, high-reward fundamental research for energy that the private sector is unlikely to invest in, as Representative Lucas just noted. But however, these fundamental research could lead to transformative technologies for the future. The Office of Science also hosts a vitally important array of large-scale scientific facilities, which are used by more than 30,000 researchers every year. The user facilities serve as an important gateway for the private sectors to tap into DOE resources and develop commercial technology as well that support our energy and environmental missions. Another unique feature of our program is science at scale. Office of Science has a long history of combining the talent and capabilities of the national laboratories, research universities, and industry to bring together multidisciplinary teams to tackle fundamental science, energy, and national security grand challenges. The most recent example I would like to mention is the launching of the National Virtual Biotechnology Laboratory, NVBL, a virtual network comprising all 17 of DOE laboratories in the fight against COVID. The multidisciplinary teams work together to address critical needs, such as novel manufacturing, to mitigate supply chain shortages from masks to ventilators, improving capabilities for effective viral detection, and expediting discovery of therapeutic drugs to complement vaccine development. In fact, in the late-breaking news, Office of Science supported effort through NVBL and the Advanced Photon Source at Argonne National Lab contributed to the highly effective antiviral drug just announced today by Pfizer. Now, more than ever, we're also poised to play a key role in advancing the fundamental science that will pave the way for tackling the climate crisis. The science of climate change itself cut across traditional disciplines of fundamental science, and we provide an environment where collaboration can thrive. Along the theme of this event, I especially resonate with the title, Building Climate and Energy Solution One Atom at a Time. Being a material scientist, I have witnessed exciting progress in the past decades or so that led to the atomic precision and material synthesis and characterization. The ability to build energy materials one atom at a time with design functionalities conveys tremendous competitive advantage to finding innovative solutions to our energy and climate challenges. However, these advances do not happen by accident, but have grown out of decades of sustained federal research support. Looking to the future, bold new investments for diverse teams to continue to pursue fundamental research that are critically needed in order for us to stay ahead of international competition, maintaining U.S. competitiveness, and creating American jobs of the future in key energy sectors. In particular, scientific breakthroughs and energy technology innovation are still very much necessary to decarbonize the U.S. economy and mitigate the worst effects of climate change. Office of Science supported basic research forms a foundation for future energy technologies. The current imperative energy systems that meet our energy security, economic, and environmental challenges requires continued robust investments in diverse areas of fundamental research to advance all energy systems, from renewables such as solar and wind, energy storage, advanced nuclear, hydrogen, fusion, carbon capture, storage, and utilization, to next generation low carbon or no carbon fuels, and many, many more of these areas. Also, by coupling climate and energy research initiatives with emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence, atomically precise materials manufacturing, and biotechnologies, we will be able to further accelerate scientific discovery and in turn provide transformative breakthroughs. For example, advancing supercomputing capabilities will enhance climate understanding and predictability through improved modeling and simulation. Harnessing artificial intelligence will expand data analysis, streamline R&D, and accelerate the pace of scientific discoveries. New quantum and nanotechnologies could be used to create energy-efficient materials and chemical processes. Novel biotechnologies will increase the sustainability of human-made systems and the robustness of natural systems. And last but not least, advanced manufacturing techniques have the potential to enable precise, sustainable, scalable processes to completely change the manufacturing paradigm. Achieving net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050 will require breakthroughs in foundational science in all of the above areas that can in turn lead to novel technology solutions. While we continue to seed future energy technologies, the Office of Science also supports research aligned with DOE's Energy Earthshots initiative to scale up energy technology within the decade, such as hydrogen fuel and long duration storage. Together with the other DOE offices, we find science-based solutions to tackle roadblocks as we scale up current generation of energy technologies through pilots and demonstration projects. In addition to robust investment in fundamental research, we also need to maintain the health of the research infrastructure. The DOE's national research infrastructure spans the United States with investment in many different communities from coast to coast. At the local and regional level, our national labs are important institutions that create jobs and drive innovations. They collectively employ over 50,000 people and host over 45,000 visiting scientists and users of its scientific user facilities each year. The Office of Science also supports researchers at more than 300 universities in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and the District of Columbia, DC. The DOE National Labs are important community partners, promoting equity and sustainable solutions for their cities and regions. DOE Labs don't simply employ scientists, but attract entrepreneurs, academic programs, small businesses, and other key players in the innovation ecosystems. Our community connections play an important role in our effort to implement the administration's environmental justice initiative to deliver direct benefits of our investments to disadvantaged communities and inform equitable research, development, and deployment goals through DOE programs. The Office of Science is also committed to building a diverse scientific workforce to sustain our successful long-term scientific research programs. This commitment extends from our workforce development efforts to the stewardship of our national laboratories and small business innovation programs. In the fiscal year 2022, Office of Science proposes a new initiative, Reaching a New Energy Sciences Workforce, or RENEW, to leverage our national labs and research infrastructure to provide undergraduate and graduate training opportunities for students and academic institutions not currently well represented in the U.S. S&T ecosystem. It is critical that we continue to recruit great minds and to also plan and build world-leading science resources. We need to competitively recruit and retain the best and the brightest and invest time and resources in cultivating talent in order to play a leading role on the international stage. Sustained investment further ensure that the DOE remains a reliable and trusted public partner with the private sector, bringing the scientific innovation to fruition and in full circle. All of these efforts require sustainable resources. Fundamental science has traditionally received strong bipartisan support in Congress, as Representative Lucas just noted. The DOE and federal lawmakers work well together, and we look forward to continuing a healthy dialogue to align our goals and strategies. As scientists, it's also important to articulate our vision for what is needed to excel in scientific leadership. We must also listen to lawmakers as representatives of the American public and respond to national needs. Let me close by reiterating the commitment of the DOE Office of Science to continue our foundational support of basic research to pave the way for innovation to meet the nation's ambitious climate and clean energy goals. Our world-leading scientists at universities and laboratories across the nation are working across disciplines and using our unique scientific facilities to deliver results. Let's continue to work together to develop transformative solutions, one atom at a time, for a brighter future for humankind and society. Thank you for the opportunity to share our exciting vision with you today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Kung, for those remarks. I'm excited now to welcome a remarkable panel of leading scientists and researchers I'd like to start with Dr. Cynthia Friend. She's the president of the Kavli Foundation, which funds basic research in the fields of astrophysics, nanoscience, neuroscience, and theoretical physics. Prior to joining Kavli, she was a member of the Harvard University faculty, where she held numerous leadership positions. And she currently serves as vice chair of the Department of Energy's Basic Energy Sciences Advisory Committee. Then we have Dr. John Handelsman, who's a professor and the director of the Wisconsin Institute for Discovery at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She previously served as a science advisor to President Barack Obama, as the associate director for science at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, where she served for 3 years. Then we turn to Dr. Jesus Velasquez, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Chemistry at the University of California, Davis, where he leads a team that studies materials that have applications in nanoelectronics, energy conversion, and environmental remediation. Finally, turn to Dr. Kathy Yellick, who is the newly appointed Vice Chancellor for Research at UC Berkeley, next door to us. Dr. Yellick, a computer scientist, has been a preeminent scholar, teacher, and leader at UC Berkeley and here at Berkeley Lab for the past 30 years. So welcome to the panel. I'd like to start our discussion just with as sort of an introduction. If you could each say a word about what got you excited about starting a career in basic science.
Great, thank you, Mike. Well, I just always had a natural curiosity about how things work and a deep interest in solving problems. And that's what excited me about basic science. I had also some great professors and teachers along the way who stimulated my interest in science through teaching me how to think logically. And then finally, big science projects like some of the things that we've heard about today, some of the large scale facilities that were very visible in my formative years were also an inspiration.
I started my career in science when I first looked through a microscope. When I was 12 years old, I took a course in science that I was petrified of, thinking I would never survive it, and I couldn't do science because I was a girl. And then I looked through a microscope and I saw paramecia, which are these one-celled little organisms that swim around and do very interesting things despite not having brains. And I never wanted to get away from a microscope again. I became a microbiologist, and I have the very microscope that I bought when I was 12 years old sitting right next to me in my office.
Well, I'm originally from Puerto Rico, and actually it was through come originally from a socioeconomic challenged background, and actually every time, at least once a year, Puerto Rico faces the challenges of hurricanes, and actually it was through that experience of having access to electricity as well as clean water being a commodity every year that inspired me to figure out ways on how to help my community. Then fast forward through just amazing training from amazing scientists, teachers, and mentors that helped me connect the dots, and now develop a program dedicated to materials to move forward these technologies at UC Davis.
So I grew up in the Midwest and had great teachers in math and science in the public school systems there. And that led me to the MIT, where I did my undergraduate and graduate work. But when I got to MIT, I really had no interest in computer science. I took one course because people said it would be useful, and I found that I just loved solving the problems that come up in computation. That is, the algorithms, trying to figure out how to make a computer do what you want it to do. And over my career, I've become even more interested in how you use computers to solve other scientific problems.
So coming to the present, maybe I'm going to ask a couple of you to talk a bit about the role the DOE Office of Science has played in your research.
Yes, actually, DOE's played multiple roles in my work as a scientist, and in particular, of course, as a funder of the research that we do, which focuses on increasing the sustainability of chemical production using nanomaterials. And it's relevant to today's topic because improvement of catalytic processes has the potential to dramatically change energy usage and to decrease it by up to 40%, according to an EU report in 2016. So direct funding of our research, but also the development and funding of advanced facilities that were referred to a number of times today, an example being the Advanced Light Source at LBNL, has also been really important in the progress of our work to characterize and understand at a very atomic level how these materials work. And then more recently, my involvement in BSAC has informed my broader understanding of the role of basic energy sciences in many critical fields. Basic energy sciences at the Department of Energy is one of the largest funders of physical science in the United States. And this past year, I led a study of U.S. competitiveness in the international landscape in research areas critical to basic energy sciences. And what we found was rather alarming. We found that the United States is being surpassed in many of these critical areas by other countries, and that corresponds to a decade of increased investment in science by other countries in Asia and Europe. And if people are interested in this report, it's publicly available on the BES website. And then most recently, to come to my current role as president of the Kavli Foundation, the foundation has partnered with the DOE Office of Science on a joint program to enhance communication between researchers doing basic science and also the public, because communication of the importance of basic science to the public who needs to support this, because we all owe our support to the United States public. That's really important to make it clear how basic science plays a critical role in the future of innovation.
Thank you, and actually thank you particular for your role in that BSAC report. If people want to know more about what Basic Energy Sciences is doing in the department, that's a good place to start.
Well, I think first and foremost through training, actually, I've been exposed to DOE National Laboratories all the way back when I was a graduate student at Buffalo. And having that opportunity to be introduced to the world of utilizing just amazing facilities like synchrotron-based techniques to characterize these materials and trying to understand them fundamentally has been a game changer for myself and I know generations of students. But then now fast forwarding to now having the fortune of being at UC Davis with my own program dedicated to designing inorganic solids atom by atom and like a Rubik's cubes. We have the power of chemistry to manipulate functionality of these materials, and DOE National Labs, not only through the experimental work, play a really important role for us to try to understand fundamental science that translates to improvement in performance, but also on the educational part, on the training that my undergraduates, graduate students, and postdocs have the great fortune of being exposed to through these interactions and collaborations with DOE National Labs.
Thank you. So I'd like to turn the attention to the climate crisis we're in and actually ask the question to a couple of you: how does investing in fundamental science provide a clear path for tackling the climate crisis at scale? And I thought, Joe Handelsman, would you like to lead us off with that?
Thanks, Mike. Well, I think basic science has always been the source of innovation and the practical advances that we've made. So basic energy sciences is definitely the investment that we need to understand the world around us to manage carbon and emissions. I think two areas that are of particular importance that have been of interest to DOE for several years are, first of all, understanding carbon storage in soil. This has many implications. One, soil is the largest terrestrial sink for carbon. It holds about 3 times more carbon than the entire atmosphere. So it's a very significant source of carbon, but it also can be a sink of carbon, a place to store it. Soil carbon is also what gives soil its stability, and our soil is being eroded at incredibly high rates across the world. We've lost 133 billion tons of carbon from soil just since the beginning of modern agriculture. So the soil can act as a repository for carbon that we want to store in ways that we're just not exploring sufficiently. And the basic science of energy storage, carbon storage in soil, I think, will be a key to that. I think we also need computational work for models in agriculture in order to understand soil. One very simple example is that when the USDA reports soil erosion, they only report two kinds of erosion that happen at the surface of the soil, and they completely ignore what's called gully erosion, which are these fairly deep guts in the land that take soil away. It probably represents half of our soil erosion, and yet it's not accounted for in most of our estimates of soil erosion. And that's the kind of thing where a combination of remote sensing, land-based measurements, and really powerful computational tools and artificial intelligence could really come together to solve that problem.
Generally speaking, basic or curiosity-driven science is really important for future innovation in general, and specifically in tackling the climate crisis, because it yields new and unexpected discoveries that ultimately can be developed into new technologies. And in fact, the most important discoveries really disrupt how we think about nature, and that can lead to revolutionary new technologies in future. Tackling the climate crisis, and I'll elaborate on this in a subsequent question, really requires new innovative approaches that will emerge from basic science, but in many different fields, because there's more than one aspect of the problem we have to tackle. One thing I'd like to emphasize, though, is that to really achieve transformational changes in technology, we need to accelerate the time between making a basic science discovery and then applying it. And in fact, this is another one of the recommendations of the BSAC report I referred to. I'm giving quite a few advertisements for that, I think. But just in a very general sense, and I'll get to more specific subsequently, basic science is very important. In fact, the reason I recently joined the Kavli Foundation, which is a California-based philanthropy, is that it has the mission of supporting basic science for the benefit of humanity. And that really reflects my view on the importance of basic science research, which is really the source of future innovation and is one of the important pillars for tackling the climate crisis.
What should the federal government be doing to ensure that basic science is helping to meet the nation's climate and clean energy goals, and really to accelerate those solutions that we need?
Well, I think one of the big aspects is keeping fundamental science funded, because my experience has been that the applications follow when the basic science discoveries are made. That happens naturally both in universities and in national labs and in industry. And it's been, the Department of Energy has been remarkably forward thinking, I think much more than many other agencies in the federal government, in the breadth of science that it supports that will lead to energy and climate solutions. For example, the soil science I talked about before, there were some really innovative programs pursuing those goals long before some of the other agencies that you might expect would be pursuing soil goals were doing that. And so the Department of Energy has always been on the cutting edge of many fields related to climate and emissions and everything related to that. And so I think keeping that basic science focus is really critical. There's been a lot of attention paid to these translational programs, trying to fund more and more in the area of turning the basic science discoveries into innovation for industry. And personally, I don't think that's needed as much as the very fundamental investment in science, because those discoveries that have implications for practical solutions, they will be converted by somebody. The funding will be there. But what limits what we can convert is how much basic science is done.
At Berkeley, we sometimes refer to climate as one of those wicked hard problems that really requires that we bring all the tools in the toolbox together. And so we don't really know what the final set of solutions are going to be. I think it's pretty clear that there's not a single silver bullet here. Right? There's not just a one technology that's going to sort of save us from climate change. So we need to explore a really broad spectrum of approaches. And but we also need to allow for the amazing and often surprising breakthroughs that come from fundamental science. So if you think about the pandemic as an analogy, I'm very thankful for the earlier investments in things like fundamental biology and genomics and understanding how, not just sort of what DNA looks like, but also how it is translated and encoded and from across these microbial species. And so we don't know where some of these breakthroughs are going to come from. And it's the reason that we need to have a broad set of investments in fundamental science. And, in the climate and energy space, clearly we want to explore new sources of energy, but also new materials for things like energy storage and carbon sequestration. Also to understand the biology and help us understand how microbes, as Dr. Handelsman talked about, things like how do they improve the yield on farms, but also how do we use them to clean up lakes and things like that. So it's sort of this broad spectrum of approaches. And by the way, going back to my computational interests, the puzzles that still come up in those kinds of biological problems is one of the things that I'm working on today. And I think that I didn't get into this field ever thinking that that was what I was going to do, or that's how the tools and algorithms that I was developing would be used. So we really need those fundamental investments across the Office of Science and science more broadly in order to make sure that we have the solutions that we're going to need for climate and energy.
So we've been hearing about the breakthroughs that are required to achieve these net zero greenhouse gas emission goals. I'd like to maybe get a couple examples of what novel breakthroughs are required.
Yes, I mean, as already was just articulated by Professor Yellick, a broad range of developments are required to achieve net zero greenhouse emissions. No single strategy is going to work. And I want to underscore something you referred to, Mike, and that is that workforce development, which requires recruitment and retention of talent to focus on basic research, is really essential in the entire range of challenges in this space, and in fact, across science and technology as a whole. So some of the examples on my list, and this is not a complete list, but one is new materials for storing energy from intermittent sources, such as wind and solar, are really essential because we have to capture those energy sources. So we need new materials to do that more efficiently. But then we need to be able to store them so that they can really replace some of the traditional ways of producing energy. We also need new ways to produce energy. And so fusion was referred to a few times today. And there, again, we need some basic understanding of those processes. Processes for producing chemicals and consumer goods need to be made more efficient, and also they need to perhaps be modified to be able to use biomass or to reuse existing materials so that you have basically a closed loop of the resources it uses is also very important and relevant to this local on-demand production of certain chemicals that take a lot of energy to make, but also to transport are important. This would be especially important in agriculture where, for example, ammonia is important as a fertilizer. If you could produce that on demand locally, that would have a huge impact, and efficiently, of course. There are many other examples, including the efficient production of clean fuel, such as hydrogen, and removal of greenhouse gases through carbon capture conversion or conversion to other useful products. So these are just a few examples. There's a very long list, and I focus on ones that I'm most familiar with. We've heard about some of the others, for example, from Professor Handelsman. But in all cases, I think we need, first of all, the talent to do the work. We also need new experimental and computational tools to be developed to accelerate progress. And basic science, I think, can really make a big impact in this, one atom at a time, but adding it to lots of atoms.
How will this sustainable investment in fundamental science help reestablish us as a global leader in scientific discovery that we need?
I think basic discovery has always been the hallmark of U.S. science that the rest of the world has envied. And it is that basic science that has made us the technological leader that we are as well. And so I think bringing the federal investment to science further up on the scale so that there's more basic science, coupled with the freedom of thought and the university system that is so important to advancement of science, and the national labs, which are so important for exploring new fields in science, I think will keep us or bring us back to a level of enormous visibility and prowess. I think it's also really important, we haven't had time to talk about it today, but to talk about how to make the workforce more equitable, because it is the workforce that will drive this, and we must educate women and minorities in the numbers needed to meet workforce demands of the future.
I think that's a good thing to end on, that the most important thing the laboratories and DOE Office of Science bring to the nation are the people who work there, and are being able to attract those people into the working on these national problems. So thank you very much on behalf of all of yours, your really excellent insights. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So now I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Richard Myers, who's the President and Science Director and Faculty Investigator at the Hudson Alpha Institute for Biotechnology in Huntsville, Alabama. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Dr. Myers and let him make some keynote remarks.
Thank you, Mike. All of the sciences, and you've heard multiple examples of this, are deeply interrelated, connecting in ways that are not sometimes obvious. Because I'm a biologist, I could rattle off many curiosity-driven biological research discoveries that have changed the world. Just a couple of those: recombinant DNA, identification of cancer-causing gene mutations, cut and paste editing of genes in living cells and organisms, and many more have not only led to a greater understanding of ourselves and other organisms, but have led to tremendous numbers of applications, products, and spawned huge industries that are having immediate impacts on the quality of life on our planet. Let me use my own experiences as one relevant example. In the mid-1980s, scientists at the Department of Energy, I happened to be lucky enough to be at the first meeting where this was discussed, were the first to propose the idea that we should determine the entire genetic makeup of a human being. And from this visionary thinking, the Human Genome Project was born. My lab at Stanford University, I was there for many years, UCSF and then Stanford University, as part of the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory's Joint Genome Institute, was fortunate enough to participate in this project over its 13-year tenure. It was funded by the DOE, and we were one of the teams that helped to develop, improve, and apply these ever-evolving technologies. They don't sit still. They move rapidly to learn how to sequence the human genome. The project involved about 19 countries around the world, but most of the work was done in the US and the UK. When we started this project, we really didn't have the goal of making products or applications or industries developing from this work, although we suspected it would happen. That was not the purpose. It was simply to collect a huge, it wasn't simple, but the goal was to collect a huge amount of data, to figure out how to collect those data, and then figure out how these sequences from this data make us what we are. We included other organisms in the early days of the project, and of course do that a lot now. And the endeavor paid off way beyond what I think any of us could have ever expected. One huge payoff has been in technology. Researchers in academia and industry recognize the great value of having even one individual's genome sequence. And this was more than has led to a more than 1 million-fold improvement in terms of cost, speed, accuracy today, literally over 1 million-fold. We can sequence a human or a plant genome for as little as $1,000, a far cry from the billions that were required to get the first sequence, when we really didn't know how to do it when we first started. It was a lot of development. I'm proud to say that the Joint Genome Institute's, DOE's Joint Genome Institute's contribution of the 3 human chromosome sequences, it's 11% of the total, not only came in on schedule or ahead of schedule, but at the highest accuracy rate of all the contributors. The Human Genome Project, and since then, has involved many improvements in DNA sequencing, machine technology, and just as critical, and you've heard about this, in the computational tools to handle, analyze, interpret, and disseminate the massive amount of data we're generating today. Because of this, every day, hundreds of thousands of research scientists and even more people in the industry use these data and these technologies to make new fundamental discoveries from now millions of people, many plants, animals, and microbes, both species and many individuals from those species. These discoveries have led to phenomenal increases in our knowledge of life, and yet there's still so much to learn. If we have the will to continue and expand these efforts, living things are very complex, and believe me, it's going to take a long time. We should expect this knowledge to grow indefinitely and probably exponentially. Because of the huge challenges facing the world today, climate change, health and disease, sustainable agriculture, we cannot afford not to support it. When the first human genome was finished in 2003, DOE and the Joint Genome Institute, including our lab, transitioned to use these technologies, infrastructure, and expertise to begin determining the genetic makeup, that is, the entire genome sequences of many additional organisms, but mostly plants, also included some microbes, fungi, and even some animals. More than half the species of these genome sequences in the public sector were sequenced by our lab and the JGI, and all of these data were made available freely to the public and to everyone immediately as they were produced. So why are we doing this? Bioenergy being a major part of this, sustainable agriculture, but really sustainable anything to do with plants, agriculture, forestry, our oceans. Desperately need to diversify the types of plants we grow for food, fuel, and clothing. And we need to move rapidly on these because of climate change and other reasons. I don't drink coffee, so this doesn't bother me so much, but coffee, chocolate, bananas, many things are in great, great peril because of the fact that they're not going to be able to be grown in their usual places. And that's not later, that's starting to happen now, sadly. A huge increase to global temperature increases is the way we do modern agriculture. We really need to be able to grow food, more and more food, and plants for other reasons as well, a whole lot more sustainably than we do now. Further, we're really running out of arable land. We may well be out of it now. So we need to improve yields and hopefully reverse the damage that's already been done. I am certain we can do this, but it'll require continued support of research. And that means really basic research in our universities, research institutes, biotech summits too, but we've seen this over and over. Industry will move in quickly when this knowledge is generated and made available. In fact, when you just using the Human Genome Project again as an example, 10 years ago, even that long ago, the Battelle firm did an extensive study to report on the return of the U.S. investment in the fundamental research efforts in the Human Genome Project of more than 140-fold. And that was 10 years ago. I'm sure it's way, way, way bigger than that now. And you'll see more and more of that. So economic impact is important, but it really will come with these discoveries, as Dr. Handelsman just mentioned. We had an agricultural revolution in the 50s and 60s last century, and much of that was based on genetics, but other technologies as well, that increased the yields of key crops several fold, staving off what surely would have been much more famine and many other problems. So these advances in our knowledge make that seem like the dark ages in a lot of ways. We can do a lot more than we are doing now. We need to keep doing this in our complex world. We need another revolution, and it actually has begun. Let me give a couple of examples. Disease resistance in our agricultural plants and our forests and everywhere are being determined by using genomics, genetics, surveillance technologies, all sorts of things, and obviously deep learning and computation. So one of our faculty member, Josh Clevenger here at Hudson Alpha Institute, is developing peanut strains. Peanuts are a big crop, not just in the Southeast in the US, but all over the world, that will be resistant to aflatoxin. One of the organism that causes that is rampant across the globe, and we have to spend a lot of money. Farmers spend about $158 an acre in pesticides just to try to keep this down. And that's a lot of money and a lot of time. And you might not even need to use that at all if you have resistant strains. That's one of many, many examples of pest resistance and weed and resistance to weeds, et cetera. Fertilizer. Only a tiny portion of the percentage of the fertilizer that's given to our plants are taken up by the roots, and most of it ends up in the water table and then in the ocean, causing algae blooms. And just even the fertilizer industry is very big on, let's figure out how to do this better. We put so much on, we could put on less if we knew it was being taken up and maybe being taken up more efficiently. Getting energy from plant waste. and including weeds. In fact, DOE is funding some of this fundamental research to figure out how to do that. We have got to figure out how to break down cellulose, which is this polymer in all plants, into monosugars so that you can maximally get energy from that. We just can't do that efficiently now. It's too expensive, but that's research is needed for that. And then my favorite, this is a little bit of a fantasy, but I think we are working on it, and I think it will happen someday, is to understand basic science, to understand what makes a plant a perennial rather than just an annual. And it's probably only a few genes that do that. You could turn an annual plant, and most of our crops are annuals, right? Sugarcane isn't, but we don't grow much here. Most of them are annuals. If you didn't have to plow them up every year, causing the erosion, soil loss, et cetera, and all the time and money and energy that goes into it, you could save a lot, even if you only had to plow them up every few years. So I think it's obvious that I'm intensely passionate about the need for supportive scientific research. We need to support the ongoing efforts. We really do. And we are, U.S. has been leaders, but we could decline with lots of competition in other countries. We really, really want to keep this going. But we need to do even more to inspire, recruit, attract and recruit and support young scientists, as Dr. Handelsman said. They are our future, and we cannot afford to lose them due to lack of opportunity and career pathways. My institute, we put in a lot of effort nationwide and actually worldwide into reaching out to the next generation, to teachers, to non-scientists, showing them the importance of research and that it is fun. So to close, I'm not coming at this only to advocate for my lab, my institute, the JGI, or the DOE, but also for my one-year-old grandson, my children, and all of your children and grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Myers, for those inspiring remarks. I'd now like to introduce our final speaker, who's Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, who represents the 1st Congressional District of Oregon. Suzanne is honored to serve on the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, where she's working to implement the Climate Action Plan, take immediate action to reduce emissions, create good-paying jobs, support a just transition, and strengthen the resilience of our communities. And she's also a member of the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology that we've heard about today, and a leader on the Subcommittee on the Environment and the Subcommittee on Energy. From this position, she works to defend science, address the causes and consequences of climate change, and make sure that policy decisions are based on independent science. And she's working to draw attention to issues that affect the coastal communities like the one she represents. So with that, Congresswoman, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's an honor to join this important discussion today. The discussion that Dr. Myers was just having about the need for the workforce in science is really critical as well. So I'm really excited to join you to participate in this important event, highlighting the critical role that the Department of Energy's Office of Science plays in helping the nation to meet its climate and clean energy goals. The Office of Science occupies a unique position within the federal research enterprise as the nation's largest sponsor of research in the physical sciences. And as part of its portfolio of activities, the office stewards 10 of the department's 17 national laboratories, and it maintains 29 scientific user facilities that are used annually by tens of thousands of researchers from across the country and around the world. We know that these resources and investments enable transformative research across a multitude of application areas, from discovering the basic building blocks of matter to the development of revolutionary clean energy technologies and everything in between. These assets enable the Office of Science to play a critical role in the fight against climate change. Advancements in battery technology and renewable energy integration can be traced directly back to the office's foundational research in areas like materials science and chemistry. And likewise, the knowledge derived from its support for research into Earth and climate system yields real-world methods for predicting climate shifts and developing resilient energy infrastructure. The office also supports a robust portfolio of research and infrastructure in fusion, a technology with the potential to deliver clean, abundant energy while producing essentially no greenhouse gas emissions. The National Laboratory Complex represents the backbone of these research efforts. The Office of Science Laboratories are home to a talented scientific and engineering workforce and a wide array of state-of-the-art user facilities that help accelerate scientific progress. Together with their partners in the academic community as well as in industry, they serve as test beds for emerging areas of strategic importance, such as quantum information science and artificial intelligence, both of which have major implications for climate science, and they're training grounds as well for the next generation of energy researchers. So as a member of the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, it is a top priority of mine, and I know Chairwoman Johnson shares this priority as well, to ensure that our federal agencies are set up for success. And that is a bipartisan effort, I know. We have been working diligently to further enable and equip the Office of Science and its national laboratories to remain vital contributors to the U.S. scientific enterprise. I'm proud of what the committee's been able to accomplish as Congress. In July, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Department of Energy Science for the Future Act, and that was passed by a wide margin. This well-vetted bipartisan measure would be the first ever comprehensive authorization for the Office of Science. It contains explicit policy direction in a broad range of topics relevant to mitigating climate change and accelerating the development of clean energy technologies. This includes authorization of research to advance the next generation of energy storage, solar energy, hydrogen, critical materials, fusion energy, manufacturing, carbon renewal, and bioenergy technologies, among others. These activities yield outcomes that feed into the many programs authorized in the Energy Act of 2020, another bipartisan piece of legislation that our committee worked hard to pass and which was signed into law at the end of last year. The bill would also authorize the investments required to ensure the timely construction and upgrade of large-scale experiments and user facilities, many of which serve as essential tools for developing and perfecting the clean energy technologies of the future. Beyond legislation, our committee has a long-standing and productive relationship with the Office of Science, which has enabled us to work closely with the department to ensure the success of its programs and projects. In addition, we've had a series of hearings designed to showcase the unique contributions of the Office of Science and to closely examine ways in which we on the committee can better enable the office to meet its mission needs. And that's a critical part of our work as well. I do want to note from my own alma mater, just yesterday, Professor Jerry Richmond was confirmed as Undersecretary of Energy for Science in the U.S. Department of Energy. And I'm proud of Professor Richmond and excited for her work at the U.S. DOE. So in closing, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak with you today. I look forward to working with the department, the national laboratories, and the stakeholder community so that the Office of Science has the resources and tools required to maintain and expand its role in addressing the significant climate and energy challenges that our nation and indeed our planet, the world, is currently facing. So thank you again for your work and for the opportunity to join you today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Congresswoman Bonamici. It was great to have you here today. And I'm really looking forward to working with Dr. Jerry Richmond, one of our most distinguished scientists taking over in this role. And thank you to all of our speakers and panelists and planners who made this virtual event possible. It's really been great to celebrate what the Office of Science is doing for the country. We hope that you leave this session with a greater understanding of the foundational role that basic science holds as we look forward to the solutions that are so essential to our national well-being. In particular, the fundamental research made possible by the Department of Energy Office of Science through its national labs and grantees is essential to achieving our clean energy and climate targets as a nation. So with that, thanks very much for coming today. And goodbye.